right, you can go ahead.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Today, I wanted to talk to you about holiday stress slash anxiety and coping with these unprecedented times of COVID-19. All right. My name is Jada Santos, and I am a clinical psychologist at Memorial Neuroscience Institute. All right. The areas that I'll be covering today are, next slide. Here we go. The areas I'll be covering are what is stress slash anxiety, how does it present, and how can we manage it, right? That's the big one. So let's go ahead and start with what is stress and anxiety. Next slide. So we're going to go over both of them because they tend to be used interchangeably, right? Stress is your body's reaction to a challenge or a demand. Now, this could be a feeling of emotional or physical tension, right? And so this is what we tend to call stress. Stress also tends to be external, right? Anxiety is a reaction to a stressful, again, i.e., a challenge or a demand, or a dangerous or unfamiliar situation. So both stress and anxiety are basically your body's reactions to particular situations. The stress is particular situation external, anxiety is internal situation, right? How your body presents with the situation. So that's why they tend to be used interchangeably. But I think that we can all agree that the holidays in general and COVID can check off these two for us, right? So let me clear something up first. Let's talk about anxiety here. Anxiety is a very normal state in humans. Okay, that's first and foremost. We all have anxiety, and we're meant to have anxiety. Sometimes people think that if they tell you that you have anxiety, or anybody talks about anxiety, that it's something that it's bad. It's not. We all have it. We need it. If you didn't have anxiety, you wouldn't even be able to get up out of bed in the morning. So anxiety is a natural state in humans. So it is what, helps us to stay alert. It keeps us aware. It motivates us. The issue is where it can become debilitating if we're unable to manage it. And so that's where the issues tend to arise, right? So let's go on to the next slide and see, how does anxiety tend to present? One of the ways it presents is cognitively. Basically, this means via certain thoughts, certain thought patterns, the way that we think, the things that we think about, the things that we tend to focus on in our minds. When we have anxiety, we tend to think of the same things over and over again, right? It's like a broken record. And you try and put it aside, and boom, it just keeps coming back up, and it keeps coming back up, and you just keep thinking about the same things over and over again. Another way that it presents itself is physiologically. So this means basically in our bodies and the actions that we take, even, our postures. This can include things like a feeling of uneasiness, feeling tense, feeling restless. Sometimes we're pacing, we're fidgety. We sometimes you'll see where we shake our leg all the time, or we're constantly with the pen, just fidgeting. Other signs could be rapid shallow breathing, sweaty palms or sweating in general, feeling hot, stomach discomfort, heart palpitations, etc. And lastly, it can trigger other emotions and behaviors. So it can trigger things like annoyance, frustration, anger, withdrawal, avoidance, procrastination, and obsessive focus. So once the anxiety is triggered, then it can lead to other things, right? All of these that I just said. These, of course, now affect other areas of our lives and environments, such as our home life, our work life, finances, health, and relationships with others, right? So with our spouses, our partners, with our children, family members, friends, coworkers, even with ourselves, right? And even with our pets. So let's get to the meat of it. The next slide is how can we manage it? So since we know that anxiety is a reaction to a stressful, dangerous, or unfamiliar situation, then we can all agree, like I said earlier, that the holidays and COVID definitely meet all of these. So let's start with the elephant in the room, right? Creating an awareness of our anxiety. The first thing is you need to be able to identify the cues as to when you're feeling anxious. So as I said earlier, this will be your thoughts, your physiology, your actions, your behaviors, right? You have to be able to identify when you're feeling anxious. And the reason I show you, thoughts, physiology, actions, behavior, because it may present different at different times for different reasons. And so in order for you to identify your own anxiety, you have to be aware of how do you present with your anxiety? What tend to be your cues? What tend to be your triggers? What tend to be your actions that you take? Because it may not always come up the same. And you may not realize that it's anxiety because it came up different this time than it did another time, right? And so you want to be able to identify when you're feeling anxious, right? So with the types of thoughts that you're having, are you having repetitive thoughts? Are you thinking the same things over and over again? Are you feeling like you're having a million thoughts run like a train through your head and they just don't stop? Your physiological responses that you're having, and other behaviors that you're engaging in as well, right? I know a big one is, when we're anxious is we tend to eat, right? And so are you eating a lot? Are you doing, what type of behaviors do you tend to do? You're the one that needs to catch these. So let's talk about that. Some of these unhelpful behaviors would be things like watching TV, right? Netflix binges. We even have a name for it. See that? Constant eating, playing games on your phone, right? We think that, oh, I'm playing games on my phone so that I can de-stress, so that I can calm myself. Yeah, no, that's not really what it is, right? Video games, shopping, drinking, drugs. These are all ways in which we are manifesting our anxiety. And they are all basically numbing behaviors, right? And so that's a numbing behavior is something that you use as a way to not deal with your anxiety. Oh, we're not at this slide just yet. But what they end up doing basically is making anxiety worse, right? So what we're doing is we're reinforcing a negative cycle by avoiding the emotion with these types of behaviors, the Netflix binges, the eating, the playing on the phone, all of these things. We're reinforcing this negative cycle by avoiding the emotion. And then what happens is we do feel a sense of relief as a result. And so that's why we think, oh, I'm doing it to relieve my anxiety. But when the situation or thought comes up again, we feel like we can't handle it. And so we avoid it again with the same behaviors. So now you're reinforcing the fact that I can't deal with this, when that's not the reality. But you're reinforcing that cycle that you can't. So when it comes up again, because it will, either the thought, the activity, or whatever it is that you need to do, then that's when you're going to have that same avoidance come up and those same behaviors come up, so that you reinforce that negative cycle, right? So let's talk about this. What can we do? So now we can go to the next slide. The first thing you want to do is acknowledge your feelings, right? You want to check in with yourself. right? So you want to become aware of your emotions, like I said, via your thoughts, your emotions, the actions you're taking, right? You may be feeling anxious slash stressed or sad due to grief, right? Um, we know that the holidays are definitely a time when we are with family and when loved ones have passed or you can't be with them for some reason, we get sad, right? And so the holidays aren't always happy, right? And so you need to make sure that you check in with yourself. What are you feeling? What is going on? What is happening with you? You know, and then realize that it's okay to feel sadness or grief, right? And it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel any feeling, honestly. But check in with yourself, know what you're feeling, and allow yourself to feel it, right? It's okay to take time to cry and express your feelings, right? Especially if we're missing someone, right? They're no longer here, either because we can't be with them due to COVID, or they've passed on, or other issues have arisen that, they are no longer able to spend time with you in this time. So make sure that you express those feelings, right? You can't force yourself or someone else to feel happy just because it's the holiday season. So don't sit there and put on this mask of, yay, I'm happy, when really that's not what's going on. That's just not going to be helpful for you. All right. The next thing you can do is reach out, right? Usually, when we haven't heard from someone in a long time, it's usually a sign they're not doing well. Unfortunately, we tend to isolate ourselves when we're not doing well. And so reaching out would make a big difference, both for ourselves, in terms of reaching out to someone and talking to other people. But if we're not doing well, but also for others if they're not doing well, right? And so checking in with others is a really big key. Sometimes, we let our pride get in the way and we say, well, they haven't reached out to me. If they were doing bad, they know that I'm here for them. They can reach out to me. Just reach out. Doesn't matter. You want to talk to them, obviously, so just check in with others. That's a good thing that you can do, right? Another thing that you can do is, when we're feeling stressed during the holidays, it helps to talk to a friend or a family member about our concerns, right? Now, due to COVID, we're doing lots of this. We're doing lots of Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and video calls and things of that nature. So that's one way which you can do it. Or, old fashioned, pick up the phone, make a phone call, and talk, share. I know that, due to COVID, we don't think that volunteering, actually is going on, but volunteering is still happening. So volunteering and helping others is another way to help lift our spirits as well as broaden friendships, right? And so you can also drop off a meal or a dessert to a friend during the holidays. It doesn't have to be where we're all getting together having this huge party. It doesn't have to be that. You can drop something off, and just share. Another thing that you can do is, let's go to the next slide. Another thing that you can do is set aside differences, right? This is going to be a big one now, especially for the holidays, right? You want to try and accept family members and friends as they are, even if they don't live up to all of your expectations right now, right? You can't change how others act during stress or during the stresses of the holidays. So during, or even during this pandemic, right? And how they're experiencing it, how we're experiencing it. But what you can change is how you respond to the situation, right? And so ultimately, you want to see the bigger picture. You don't want to lose sight of what's really important, right? What is the point of the holiday, So you want to set aside the grievances until it's a more appropriate time to discuss them, right? Be understanding of others if they get upset or distressed when something goes awry. That may just be their way of responding just because they're stressed out. It's not necessarily at you, it's just they're also up to here with everything that's going on. So, You want to make sure that you are being kind, compassionate, and understanding, right? Realize that others' reactions just may be a result of their own struggles. And when you realize that, that can help you to soften up your own frustration so that you can be more compassionate and not take it personally, right? If things do get tense with someone, make sure you take a deep breath, take a few, because those deep breaths can definitely shift things and give you a new perspective. So take deep breaths, a lot of them, right? Next, let's talk about being realistic. Next slide. All right, so let's be realistic. We're all in a pandemic, right? So realize that the holidays don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be exactly how they were last year, how they've always been. It doesn't have to be that way. There's no mandate that says, this is what it has to be. Okay. You have to be realistic. The other thing is, before you start prepping, acknowledge that things likely won't go exactly as planned. Realize that. Realize that now, so that when things go awry, you're not kind of like, really now? Because it's not going to go as planned. Most things are not going to go as planned. And it's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay. Actually, imperfection is healthy and normal. That's what we're here, that we're all imperfect. Life is trial and error. So imperfection is actually a norm. And for some of us, that just might take a little practice to deal with, but use those breaths I talked about earlier, right? As families change and grow, we also change traditions and rituals as well. So when you have a new baby in the family, oh, well, now it's not just, this one and that one. Now we have another one, and we add an extra plate, and we do this and we do that, and we do extra things. Now there's, the kids are all in their teens, and now you have a new baby. Well, that holiday is going to be very different, because the past couple years you've been doing things for teens. Now, when you have a baby, you're going to incorporate new things. So these things change all the time anyways, just normally, right? And so you want to make sure that you realize that. What you do want to do is choose a few to hold on to and be open to creating new things, right? New traditions, new rituals, new things that you want to talk about. If people can't come over, find new ways to celebrate together, such as sharing pictures, sharing emails, sharing videos, meeting virtually on video calls. Listen, even though your plans look different this year, you can definitely always find reasons to celebrate and ways to celebrate. So again, don't lose sight of what is the point of the holiday, right? Don't lose sight of the big picture. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So COVID has been, it's basically taken up this entire year, right? And so it's definitely affected many people financially, right? And so one of the big things that you want to make sure that you do is you want to stick to a budget, right? You do not want to try and buy happiness with an avalanche of gifts, right? That's not the thing you want to do. So before you do your gift food shopping, you want to decide how much money can you afford to spend. Don't just go out there and, buy everything. Not even go out there. Here's the biggest issue. Amazon, right? Going online and buying everything, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. You want to, before you start, you want to give yourself a budget. How much money are you willing and can you afford to spend, right? No, let's stay on the last one. Then you want to stick to that budget. All right. You don't want to try and buy happiness with an avalanche of gifts. So some of the alternatives are, oh, we're not there yet. Okay, some of the alternatives are homemade gifts, start a family exchange, exchange family videos, right? That's a good one. Or even trading recipes now that people are staying at their own homes or what have you, trading recipes so that you can actually have, something that you're used to having on a holiday that you may not have with them. So let's talk about planning and coping ahead, right? This is how we really deal with it, planning and coping ahead. So do things like travel complications, restrictions, and susceptible family members. There'll be plenty of rethinking plans and possibly canceling them altogether, right? And so adding more anguish to a period already filled with immense stress, right? Yeah. Whether the issue is how to plan gatherings, what to do if you can't see family, or even if you and your family disagree about the best course of action, there could be tough choices ahead, right? And so starting to plan and cope ahead of time so that you can begin assessing what your options are rather than waiting until things don't go as planned is especially good to do because all of the uncertainty that we are definitely going to face. All right. So one of the things that you want to do, let's go to the next slide, is you want to assess all the risks, right? And so what is this? This is such as where you're traveling to, where you're traveling from, what are the COVID guidelines and restrictions and the numbers there and where you're at, as well as be aware of the differences that extra precautions may need to be taken depending where you're going and where you're coming from, right? You also want to assess at-risk family members, both the ones that you are traveling with and the ones that you are traveling to see, right? Who is at risk, right? And what issues health-wise may they have? Another thing that you want to assess is the mode of transportation being used to get there, also when you arrive, and the risks associated with those things as well, right? Another thing you need to think about is your comfort level, right? With traveling with your family's risk level, as well as your family's risk level. So you want to think about family members you're traveling to see as well, right? So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you are assessing the risk, right? Comfort level is going to be a big one, and we're going to talk about that later on, but just realize that that's a huge one. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Managing family expectations. All right, so in managing family expectations, one of the things that you need to look at is family behavior, right? And so think about how the family that you are thinking of visiting have behaved, or whether or not they've been following the precautions, whether they've been attending crowded events, whether they've been traveling to other places, doing other things. Consider how seriously they're taking it, right? And so looking at family behavior is going to help you to make these decisions and to figure out what the expectations truly are, right? Look at the role and responsibility that you play in the family holiday gathering. Are you going just because it's extremely important, or is it out of an obligation, right? Roles and responsibilities shift, and it's different depending on what you're doing. If you're hosting the event, it's a very different role to consider and coordinate, making sure that everybody's comfortable, versus if you're traveling or attending as a guest, right? Those are very different roles and very different responsibilities that need to be taken as a result of that, right? And so that's going to help you figure out how to manage family expectations based on what your role and responsibility is going to be. You also have to weigh the concerns, right, against other responsibilities, even if that risks hurting your family's feelings. Here's a big key, right? So if I'm a parent and I have a child with severe asthma, my role as a parent is to protect my child more than it is to protect my relative's feelings. Did you feel that? I know you felt that, right? That's strong. It's your responsibility as a parent to protect your child more than it is to protect your relative's feelings. This goes back to that comfort level, right? So let's keep on going. Next thing is, what happens if after you weigh all of these concerns and you do all of this, let's go to the next slide. We decide that we are going to skip the family gathering altogether. Okay, well, if after taking all the risks into account, you decide to skip it, that's fine. It's important to keep your feelings, your comfort, and your responsibilities at the forefront, right? Your situation could also change suddenly. It could be all of a sudden someone has a positive test or an onset of symptoms that either you or your family have, right? So that might change the situation immediately. Plans could always go sideways at the last minute. So talking about the possibilities ahead of time is recommended so that way we can address all the issues. All right, so let's go to the next slide, which will be confronting emotions, right? Once the decision is made that you're now going to have to cope not only with your own emotions, but those of your family as well, right? And so for both sides, acknowledging some of your more difficult emotions, such as the sadness or the disappointment, is really important, right? Sometimes people believe ignoring emotions is the same as controlling them, but it's not. That's just suppressing them, right? So that's not really helping. Instead, it's okay to admit that you're sad and disappointed and that you'll miss these events, but it's entirely possible to still turn the holiday into a positive experience, albeit different, with alternative plans as previously discussed, even if it's not what you'd hope for, okay? So let's go on to the next slide and talk about, so what if my family doesn't understand, right? What if they're not happy? What if they're not understanding, well, why aren't you coming? And, we're family and you're supposed to come and this is the way that it's always been. And who do you think you are? And how can you do this? And all of this, right? So we've seen a wide range of reactions to the pandemic for those who take it very seriously and those who treat it like it's not such a big deal, right? And if you and your family have different stances on this, it could bring conflict if you decide to skip the festivities, right? And so the way that you approach the conversation is important, right? So how to approach the conversation. If this is the situation, then consider going back to planning and coping ahead. If they are willing to cross boundaries, right, and make you feel uncomfortable about this decision, the chances are they've done this before. As humans, we're creatures of habit, so it's not like this would have been the first time you would have seen this or heard this in their behaviors, right? And so going back to earlier when I said managing family expectations, you know your family, you know the people around you, you know how they react, you know how they respond, you know the types of things that they believe and how they deal with things. And so this wouldn't be something that comes out of the blue. You know that they've done this before. And so, mind you, I mean, I guess it might possibly come out of the blue. It's probably a little bit more rare, but it could be possible. And again, letting them know well ahead of time can help prepare them for the emotional letdown that they may have, right? Also, keep in mind your role in the family gatherings, your responsibility to your immediate family, and again, your comfort level, right? Be clear about those feelings and ask yourself what your goal in your conversation with your disagreeing family is. What's the goal, right? Is the goal for me to set a boundary and stick up for myself or my family? Then if that's the goal, it's key that don't let the debate drift away from your feelings and your comfort level, right? Don't let it drift away. The goal is not to have a debate about the validity of science or why wearing a mask is important or who believes what or what it is. That's the tangent that could get you into an argument. That's what you don't want, right? Instead, it's about taking a stance of agreeing to disagree, but setting your own personal boundaries. You're saying, I have to do what's right for me and my family, right? It's important to make sure the other person does feel heard though, right? You don't just want to come in barreling with this. You want to make sure that what they're feeling is also being heard, right? So really talk to them about acknowledging their emotions, acknowledging that I know you must feel hurt or disappointed or angry. You know who you're talking to, so you know what it is that's going on with them. Or maybe they're just irritated that the pandemic is exaggerated. Whatever the issue is, make sure that they feel heard, okay? Just remember that this is about setting a boundary, and it's important to say that it's disappointing. And unfortunately, with all the uncertainty, we're going to have to stay home this year for the holidays. That's it. That's the bottom line. So it's important to say it. You can't back down from that if that's your choice. You can again suggest the alternatives previously discussed, right? Give them a few days to think about it and let it sink in, and then tell them that you still love them, you still care about them, and that there are other ways to celebrate. All right. So let's go on to the next slide, accepting the inevitable, right? So, we talked about all of that. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. Accepting the inevitable. So it's also important that there might not be any compromise, or that your rebuffed family members might still be upset, right? Some people are going to be unhappy no matter what. But again, you've likely seen that in their behavior before as well, right? It's not going to be something new. For them, all you can do is tell them that you're very sorry, they are disappointed, and that you are disappointed too. Realize that they have to cope with their own emotions, okay? And you also have to accept they're just going to be unhappy. And if that's how they're going to be, then you might as well as do what's best for you anyways, right? You might as well do what's best for you anyways. If they're going to be unhappy, no matter what, do what's best for you. All right. All right. So moving on. That was a big one, but moving on. One of the things, next slide, please. One of the things is you don't want to forget to do small things every day, right? And this is what tends to happen in the holidays. We get so flustered with the hustle and bustle and all the different things and the festivities, and I need to get a tree and I need to decorate and I want to do this and I want to be with that, and that we tend to forget to do our small things that actually keep us nice and healthy and keep us going, right? And so you don't want to abandon the health habit. You don't want to let the holiday be free for all, right? Overindulgence only adds to your own stress and guilt, right? Because later on, you're kind of like, maybe I shouldn't have had that whole cake, right? And make sure that you have a healthy snack before a holiday meal, so that you don't go overboard on sweets or cheese or drinks or food, right? We just passed Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving tends to be one of those holidays where it's like, we just wait for that one big meal. And, you starve yourself the whole day until that one meal. That's not the best thing for you. If your meal is planned for 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock at night, make sure you have breakfast, make sure you have lunch, have your regular meals, because that's just another meal. You do not want to do that, because you're going to tend to go overboard, right? And for those other meals, you want to make sure they're healthy meals, right? Your breakfast and your lunch, you want to make sure that they're okay. Get plenty of sleep. Sometimes with the excitement and or the anxiety or the stress, sleep tends to be affected. You want to make sure that you are addressing and getting the sleep that you need, right? Include regular physical activity in your daily routine. Sometimes that's shopping, you're walking around, you're doing your physical activity there. Others is actually going outside for a walk, going, and doing some exercise, doing what you need to do. Deep breathing exercises is going to be a huge thing. This is going to be an everyday thing that you're going to need to incorporate for yourself to help to manage your emotions, manage your expectations, and manage other people's moods and how you're going to respond to that. All right, so lots of deep breathing. Meditation and yoga, I recommend these on a daily. So this is not just because of the holidays, this is because of life and the hectic society in which we live in, which is an overscheduled society, that we need this for us, right? Your body needs this, your mental health needs this, everything needs this. So meditation, yoga, those are all great things to incorporate into small things that we do on a daily basis for ourselves. You definitely want to avoid excessive tobacco, alcohol, drug use, not good for you. Definitely going to shift your mood into other arenas, right? You want to be aware of how social media and the news affect you and how it can produce undue stress, right? We all just went through the election. If there was something that I heard about the most, it was election stress, election anxiety. And, everybody was telling me, they were like, I'm just so stressed out with this. But at the same time, they're sitting there with the TV on almost 24/7, watching all of the news stations, listening to who said what and what is this one saying? What's this one's opinion? And all that's doing is creating more anxiety in yourself. Same thing as us with our phones and just constantly scrolling, through social media and everything that you're seeing and hearing and who's posting and what are they doing and what that is building up your stress and your anxiety. So realize that that is something that does affect you, right? Again, while you're thinking, I'm doing this to kind of just calm myself down. Are you really though? Is it really calming you down? Pay attention, be aware of yourself, right? And adjust the time that you spend on, like I just said, scrolling and watching the news. Super important, right? All right, next slide. We are talking about taking a breather. So I've been talking a lot about that, right? A lot about taking a breath. Well, here is also make some time for yourself, right? Find an activity that you enjoy, take a break by yourself, even if it's just a bathroom break, right? Some of us have little ones, they chase you everywhere you go. So sometimes it's just locking yourself into the bathroom for 2 minutes, whatever you need to do. Find some time for yourself, right? Find some time for yourself. Spending just 15 minutes alone without distraction, including phones, right? Social media or other things, may refresh you just enough to handle everything that you need to do. All right, 15 minutes. That's not a lot, people. That's not a lot. Find something that reduces stress by clearing your mind, slowing down your breathing, restoring your inner calm, right? Options include things like taking a walk at night, stargazing, listening to soothing music, reading a book, right? Anything. All right, and the next slide is seek professional help if you need it, right? Despite your best efforts, you may find yourself feeling persistently sad or anxious, plagued by physical complaints, unable to sleep, irritable, hopeless. We did that one already. Let's go to the next slide. Or unable to face routine chores. So if these feelings last for a while, make sure you talk to your doctor or mental health professional. All right, next slide. Ultimately, you want to not let the holidays be something that you dread. Instead, you want to take steps to prevent the stress that can descend during the holidays. Learn to recognize your holiday triggers, right? Such as financial pressures or personal demands, so that you can combat them before they lead to a meltdown, right? And again, with a little planning, some positive thinking, you can find peace and joy during the holidays. Thank you for having me, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? I see Brianne. We have another person on there. Does anyone have any questions for, I know we're kind of close on time, but I'm sure if we have a question or two, we can go ahead and answer that. I know I did receive a lot of great comments too during the thing that this is just what they needed. So again, Dr. Santos, we appreciate this. This is super helpful for all of us. Perfect timing. I know we're all feeling a lot right now, not just the holidays this year, but a lot more. So we appreciate these tips for sure. This is something that everyone can definitely use. So again, we appreciate everyone's time and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, bye-bye.